Listen carefully. There are atrocities happening all across the globe. There's a genocide in Gaza. There is a femicide in the Congo, natural disasters, starving children in Africa. But all of that pales in comparison to the affliction of elite Hollywood women. And they are still complaining about it, and they need to be heard, which is why audiences are clamoring for more of their female stories. And this is what we have heard most recently from Kate Winslet. She was paired up with Zoe Saldana in the Variety Actors on Actors series. And in their conversation, she went on a long-winded explanation of how the Me Too movement is actually to credit for a new cultural shift where audiences are wanting to hear female stories more than ever, whatever that means.
I like that Kate Winslet was cryogenically frozen and woke up and it still thinks it's 2018.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, have you been paying attention at all?
No, apparently not.
Kate.
Should we watch this clip?
Yeah, let's take a look.
All right, here we go, guys.
I think we're so lucky that we are living in a time where perhaps things are changing in terms of the culture shifting towards our industry and audiences wanting to hear female stories more than ever before. And I think that you and I have both benefited tremendously from that shift in our culture. And I think a lot of it is to do with Me Too opening ears and giving us all as women a shared space in which we can come together and hear one another, but really in a different way, in a new way.
Absolutely.
And I think that in turn is impacting on how writers are writing their stories for us. I think it's impacting on how audiences are craving these kinds of stories.
Absolutely.
And we are given permission and positions within which to perform, tell those stories, use our voices on the behalf of so many. I think.
Okay.
It's just funny to me the way that Zoe Saldana is sitting across from her being like, yes, absolutely.
Well, I mean, you're kind of like, you have to.
You have no choice.
She can't be like, nah, bitch, you're wrong. Like,
but I want to know.
What if she just been like, miss me with that nonsense?
What the hell is a female story? If we think that women are equal in dignity to men, shouldn't their stories just be considered stories?
Yes, they should.
Led by women?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
that should be an accident to it. I don't know. But then she also went on to say in the same interview, we are trying to live our lives as women, redefining femininity to mean resilience and power and courage and compassion.
What's weird is that if they actually followed their own advice and made stories based on broad concepts and ideas like the ones you just listed, that would be great. Like, everybody loves the idea of a story that tells. So we're going to cover a thing tomorrow about the unwokening. And one of the movies that they reference in there is Twisters, where it's like, this could have been ideological propaganda, but became a story about humans working together to overcome, tragic circumstances. Great, wide range of ideas, broad ideas, not something as narrowly focused as, say, climate change or something like that. But they always pay lip service to the broad ideas, but the stories are never about broad concepts. They're about very, very narrow frames of focus. So it makes no sense.
Controversial, but I don't think femininity needs to be redefined.
Also, you can push back. So recently, Olivia Wilde gave an interview where she talked about how, telling stories for her, it doesn't necessarily have to mean about mass appeal. Otherwise, she kind of sacrifices her own storytelling. We talked about it a little bit on Friday. And my point was, like, you need fans. Otherwise, you're being given a certain amount of money to make a movie. And if nobody buys the tickets, then it doesn't really matter. Most of the stories that would appeal to women these days that are still being told through a feminist lens, think of Anne Hathaway's movie that came, the Anne Hathaway romantic comedy or
the idea of you.
Any of these movies are going to be made, but they're going to be made for streaming services. The winners of that market right now tend to be someone like Sydney Sweeney, who made Anyone But You, which was supposed to go to streaming but went straight to the theater, and people liked and thought was fine for being kind of a, I don't know if trashy is the right word, but a corny romantic comedy, right? Fine. The idea of the broad stories, nobody's really looking for broad stories about one gender or the other. They're looking for stories that feel authentic, and then whoever the head of the story is whoever the head of the story is. It's just harder when you try to tell stories that are traditionally male and put females in there.
They just have such a narrow idea of what those traits look like. Like, courage is actually just, bossing people around.
Yeah.
Or
being snarky.
Bravery is actually,
telling your boss you microaggressed against you.
like being brash or like oversensitive.
The biggest problem for me in movies these days, and this is a problem of characters that are both men and women, but it's especially prevalent in the way they write female characters. I don't know who's responsible, but it's the snarky trend. It's the snarky trend that you can pretend like it doesn't matter all you want. Making likable characters matters. It does. Not every character needs to be there. You can reset the counter. The character of Gregory House is not a likable character. But the character of Gregory House is compelling in that he is extremely resistant to being vulnerable, while also simultaneously being unbelievably vulnerable due to his addiction and his nihilism.
We want
and all of this stuff
to see. Okay, like we want to see a female character that has flaws. Is that so much of an ask?
Yes.
I mean, really,
yes,
really.
It is.
This is why I love like a story by Jane Austen, like Emma, where you're like showing the folly of a woman who is pulling all of the strings to control and manipulate people that she claims to care about. And like that is a really compelling story that only women understand firsthand. That is a female story.
Yeah.
Now that is a female story. That is not a story that Hollywood has the courage to do right now, not in this moment. And it's just disheartening that all of these traits, you're trying to redefine femininity into all of these traits that have never been associated with femininity.
But with masculine.
Where is the vulnerability? Why is this war being waged against vulnerability of any kind? It's just so ugly.
You can even do it in male-centric stories. I'll give you an example from what I referenced earlier. Think in Twisters. What's her name? The lead character. I don't even remember her name, but the one
Daisy Edgar Jones.
Daisy Edgar Jones's character. People were calling her a Mary Sue. She absolutely was not. So there's besides watching all of her friends die in a storm at the very, very beginning. Then when she gets pulled back into this whole storm chasing mishgas, she basically panics early on. And yes, she's very good at her job, and in a lot of ways there is a lot of fawning over just how good she is, and that could have probably been dialed back a little bit from the one character, but I think it was designed to make him look more like, he's kind of a simp compared to Glenn Powell's character, who's the bad boy. But the point being is that despite the fact that she's extremely competent at what she does, she allows herself to be vulnerable in front of both her friend by screwing up early on, and then later with Glenn Powell's character by opening up to him about what had happened to her when they're like in that barn and stuff like that.
He also saved her life.
Yes, and he is allowed to save her life. But then at the end, she gets to save the day as well. This type of writing is not easy. It actually does take work to, I would say it's not even just the writing. You need great story editors to be able to take that first draft, really, really dissect it and say, this is good. Maybe we pare back here and we even things out because we're leaning too heavily one direction or the other. And it feels like in a lot of ways, it's not even so much, it's a lot of bad writing, but it's a lot of poor editing that goes into the storytelling today.
Well, the complaining does not end there. In a recent interview, Florence Pugh complained about how exhausting it is to be a young woman in Hollywood.
We got a 20 from Mr. Moose Knuckle. It says,
didn't see
more
that
Ripley
one.
from Aliens and less, oh my God, girl boss.
I mean, that
Thank
would be
you.
nice. She said, there are fine lines that women have to stay within. Otherwise, they're called a diva, demanding, problematic. And I don't want to fit into stereotypes made by others. It's just really exhausting for a young woman to be in this industry and actually other industries. And she was saying this in response to Keira Knightley's recent comments about what it was like to rise to fame after the Pirates franchise.
So 20 here from Just 'Cause I'm Free says, a good character is one that's flawed and either overcomes those flaws or the flaws are because of a sympathetic reason. Feminist movies can't make women look bad in any way. Major plot problem. Bring back Bald Phil.
We
Well,
will
we can
eventually.
do that. Thank you.
Keira Knightley's comments were about her privacy being invaded. But Florence Pugh continued, I remember watching this industry and feeling that I wasn't represented. I remember god-awful headlines about how Keira Knightley isn't thin anymore, or watching women get torn apart despite being talented and beautiful. The only thing people want to talk about is some useless crap about how they look. And so I didn't care to abide by those rules. That's crazy, though. That is just a crazy thing to say when you're Florence Pugh basically forcing the world to look at your tits.
In Oppenheimer.
Not in Oppenheimer.
In general.
On a red carpet with a see-through shirt.
Oh, I forgot about that. I
That was
completely forgot
before
about that. Yeah.
Oppenheimer ever came out. And writing an entire essay about how you don't think the right opinion about her tits. I mean, this is like the least reliable narrator.
Also, like when she says she doesn't feel like she herself was represented, does she mean like white women? There's lots of white women in Hollywood. Does she mean like white women that look like her? Because if that's the case, then I would like to then formally request that Hollywood represent more men like me, meaning bespectacled 5'5" men from St. Paul, Minnesota, who played hockey growing up and went through a series of other things in their life and now host a podcast. I want characters that look, sound, behave, act exactly like me so that when I watch movies, I can feel 110% represented, except for the fact that men understand, and not to be sexist, that that's not the way that these things work. Fairness doesn't really come into it. It's not about what's fair. It's about what sells. And it's not about whether you're represented. It's about whether the people that are being represented on screen are broad enough that it brings in enough money. It's not about representation. It's about selling movie tickets.
Yeah, okay. I just have to reiterate, this was back in 2022.
So before, because Oppenheimer was the year after.
Yeah, Florence Pugh posed in this see-through pink dress with her boobs fully visible on a red carpet.
Oh, Jack
She
Dubs.
wrote an entire caption on Instagram about Hollywood's obsession with body image, calling it exhausting.
Say what you want, but the men are still required to be attractive and shirtless in most movies these days.
So she, like, everyone only wants to talk about how I look, but I'm going to
Make it about what I look like.
Yeah, I'm going to draw as much attention as possible to what I look like naked. That's incredibly hypocritical. I can't get over that.
I have to call attention to Jack Dubs in the chat, which I forgot about this. I should be paid for every minute I have to wear this princess dress. Do you remember when Rachel Zegler said that? It was Rachel Zegler, right?
Was it?
Very early on.
Was it her?
It was Rachel Zegler. I'm almost positive of it. Yep.
Right. Yeah, it was during the strike.
Yeah.
It was during the strike that she said that. But this was Keira Knightley's comment that Florence Pugh was responding to. Keira Knightley said, it's very brutal to have your privacy taken away in your teenage years, early 20s, and be put under that scrutiny at a point when you're still growing. Having said that, I wouldn't have the financial stability or the career I do now without that period. I had a 5-year period between the age of 17 and 21. I'm never going to have that kind of success again. It totally set me up for life. Did it come at a cost? Yes, it did. It came at a big cost. Knightley said that her jaw dropped at the time over how she was treated by the public and, quote, I didn't think it was okay at the time. I was very clear on it being absolutely shocking. There was an amount of gaslighting to be told by a load of men that you wanted this. It was rape speak. You know, this is what you deserve. It was a very violent, misogynistic atmosphere.
No.
They were specifically meant, I wanted to be stalked by men.
There is.
So she's saying they were trying to tell her she wanted to attract stalkers, whether that was stalking because somebody was mentally ill or because they were earning money from it. It felt the same to me. It was a brutal time to be a young woman in the public eye. And social media has put that in a whole other context. When you look at the damage that's been done to young women, to teenage girls, ultimately that's what fame is. It's being publicly shamed. A lot of teenage girls don't survive that.
I can have
strongly worded.
I can be very, very empathetic to what happened to you, and nobody should ever stalk anyone. That's not okay. It never will be okay. But most of the time, if you ask a dude, you know, his opinion on something like this, he's going to give you the more pragmatic answer, which is that what happened to you is wrong. But when you make a choice about a career or a job that you enter into, you have to make a decision for yourself as a full-grown adult with agency, whether you're going to be okay with dealing with the consequences of those of that profession. Now, that will never make what happened to you okay if somebody violated you in some way, shape, or form. But most people take the pragmatic approach, especially if we're talking about these types of things, which is they talk a lot about the idea of being objectified, of being judged by people. And I hate to be so blunt, but it's very hard to care outside of somebody physically attacking you or crossing boundaries. We're not talking about doxing. We're not talking about attacking you physically. But if what we're talking about is how people treat you on the internet, whether people are mean to you on the internet, that's a trade-off that you had to be willing to make to enter into your profession. And that will be true of both men and women forever, as long as the internet exists. That's never going away. It will be true of every celebrity forever. The difference is men understand that it's going to happen to them a little bit less, and they know that people aren't going to have any real sympathy for their choices anyways, because that's not how we're conditioned as people.
In all fairness to Keira Knightley in particular, though, she was very clear that she understood that trade-off.
Yes.
And that it was worth it because
she made that point.
It set her up financially for life.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean,
but I don't like
acknowledging that.
I don't like rape speak. I don't equating.
I mean, that's just like
other.
Buzzwords that she heard somewhere and repeated. But
thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.